Hello, my name is Stephen Shi, and I'm part of Team One, and we have decided to do our cultural project presentation on doing business in Russia. And first, some basic information. Russia is in the northeastern hemisphere over here, and it occupies 6.6 million square miles, which is 1.8 times larger than the United States. The population is 144 million people, and the president is Vladimir Putin, who has been president since 2012, and he had an earlier term between 2000 and 2008. And why do business in Russia? It's the sixth largest economy, sixth largest domestic market, and it's expected to grow to $4.3 trillion in 2019. There's a lot of natural resources, skilled labor force, can be a marketplace for U.S. goods, and we can be a marketplace for Russian goods. So Russia has a lot of natural resources. 50% of the GDP is devoted to oil and gas. Russia has 30% of iron reserves. And Russia makes 30% of the world's titanium. So titanium is a very important metal for defense and aerospace industry. Russia has a skilled labor force, and this is shown by the very advanced aerospace technologies, and companies like Boeing have businesses where they utilize Russia engineers and labor. Russia has special economic zones, which is also set up to encourage Western or a business investment from foreign countries, not just Western, but also Asia. So there's industrial economic zones, which are set up to encourage manufacturing, such as automobile manufacturing, aerospace manufacturing, computer software. There's innovation zones, which are set up to encourage research, such as advanced materials, pharmaceuticals, and biology, and there's tourism economic zones, which are set up for hotels and entertainment parks, and there's logistics zones, which are ports where we can import and export to make import and export these items easy. And as I mentioned earlier, Russia is very good with advanced aerospace products, and one good example is that the United Launch Alliance, which is an alliance of Boeing and Lockheed Martin, uses Russian-made rockets to launch satellites. Computer softwares, like well-known softwares, Kaspersky is Russian. There's a lot of fuel and natural gas, even though it's not used by the United States. It's exported to China and other countries. Agriculture and defense are notable markets. In the corner, I put in the top 10 positive net exports, and now we go to import markets or markets for opportunities of U.S. products. So we have retailers like Walmart, food and beverage, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's already have presence. Hollywood, tourism and hospitality. Machinery and vehicles, where General Motors, Ford, they already have business in Russia already. And in the corner, I put in some net imports, and these are growing. And next, we have Tatiana, who will provide the similarities and differences between the cultures.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, my name is Tatiana, and I will talk about the similarities and differences between two cultures. Talking about the similarities, both countries has a large territory. Russia is on the first place, and United States is on the third place. Both countries has a great power. Multiple ethnicities, huge diversity in societies. Both countries has government religion Christianity, and both nations has a great hospitality, and both value value self-sufficiency. Talking about differences, the personal space. There is no such thing as a personal space in Russia. So basically, your space is their space. If American people prefer 3 to 4 feet space between, then in Russia there is no space. And while during conversation they try even to reduce this space, and the bigger space is a sign of disrespect. So the attitude of the citizen and the government. In average Russia, the stability of their own moral guidelines is much weaker than it comes to interacting with government. The Russians quite willingly sacrifice their own principles. Explaining the reason for such attitude, we can refer to history. In Russia, it was safer and more profitable to yield to dispute with the authorities, since the authorities will never made any concessions. It was in Russian Empire and in Soviet Union with its totalitarian ideology. Another difference is straightforwardness. Russians are very straightforward in conversation. They are not rude or offensive. It is norm to be blunt and ask personal things such as finances or political viewpoints. The Russian public behavior seems to be more aggressive than the other culture used to. It seems that Russians don't speak, they shout at each other. And this manner of communication may seem strange. However, it doesn't mean that all conflict has arisen between people. In some disputes, emotions just replace the arguments. And Russia generally like to do everything with passion and enthusiasm. And at the same time, many note that Russians are not rude, but on the contrary, they are very sentimental. Another difference is approach. Russians are very cold and secret in public. What does pineapple, coconut, and watermelon have in common? Most often, Americans compare Russian like soft and delicious inside and more bitter and stale outside. Russians prefer to stay quiet in public, while American people can talk loudly and even make business calls. And another difference is smile. In USA, strangers are smiling at each other, and this is a sign of neutral benevolence. In Russia, Russian only smiles. Smile as a sign of friendship. So basically, strangers don't smile at each other. Another difference is apologies. Americans apologize for possible inconvenience they may cause to another person, and not only what has already done. At the request to free the road, you can hear often "excuse me," and it's normal for here. But for Russians, it's uncharacteristical anticipatory apology, and Russians are more likely to apologize for violation that already been done, and sometimes only the victim turns their attention to the violation committed. So, and that's the differences between two cultures. And now Jay will talk about business customs.
Hello everyone, I'm Jay. I'm going to talk about the business customs of Russia versus United States. Obviously, when you're conducting business, just like the United States and Russia, they require formal wear. Men usually wear suits. Women can wear suits or skirts that aren't inappropriate or too racy. Meetings and discussions, the difference between the United States and the way Russians conduct business. A lot of times in the United States, we do a lot of group work. There's a lot of talking and decisions are made widely, as in Russia. For the most part, decisions are made by the higher up. In meetings, usually all the attention is on the higher up. Small chit chatter here and there is considered disrespectful. So if you are conducting business in Russia, seriousness, attention to the person talking, don't expect to collaborate as much in meetings, things like that. So adapting to the culture, patience. Patience is a virtue in Russia. They do business a lot slower than we do. Decisions are made on a slower basis with a lot more thinking, and they like personal relationships. It's not likely that you would make a deal in Russia if you don't have some kind of personal relationship with the counterpart. So building personal relationships is really important. Expect to spend a lot of time in the meetings. Indecisiveness could be considered a sign of weakness in Russia. So when you are conducting business, you want to make sure that you're speaking your points very clearly, that you're confident in what you're saying. You want to make sure that there's no hesitation, because that could possibly ruin a deal for you, or just be considered a sign of weakness. Learning the history is really important in Russia, just because it could be considered. So anyway, the more you know about the history, it's actually, there you go, patience and history. So the more you know about the history, Russians are really proud of their culture, and they love to speak about it with others. Educating yourself on Russian policies could go a long way when you're doing business in Russia. Insight of great conversation starters tend to impress business men and women. Taking the time to even learn the language could show your Russian partners that you actually have a great amount of respect for their country. And then just building business relationships. Networking is super important. Communication is key in any relationship, so surely in business it would be important. Russian communication is very important, and it's personal. Again, like I stated earlier, in the United States, we use various forms of communication when we do business: emails, phone calls, faxes. In Russia, they're more face-to-face. It's more personable. Like I said, don't expect to, be in and out. They like to, stay in the meeting until everyone is satisfied, until a decision is, made, and everyone walks away feeling like there was an agreement. And I think that's it, right?
Hi, my name is Alex Lee, and I'll be talking about travel in Russia. First thing I would like to discuss is obtaining your visa. Getting a Russian visa isn't particularly difficult, but it is a time-consuming process. An invitation letter is required for both leisure and business travelers. The purpose of this letter is to let the Russian government know your plans. This application letter is good for 3 years because it may take you time to finalize your itinerary. You will either need to apply online or in person at a registered Russian travel agency. Getting a personal invitation letter may take up to a month. If you have proper documentation, it may only take you 2 to 3 days to process and get your visa. If there are problems with your application, it could delay your visa for several weeks. Second thing I would like to discuss is proper paperwork. Some of the required documentation are a valid passport, recent photograph, and application. Your passport should be valid for at least 6 months and needs 2 blank boxes for the visa and migration card. If you're traveling to work, proof of employment may be required. Travel insurance and medical certification that you are not HIV positive are required by some embassies. Next thing I would like to talk about are guidebooks. First guidebook I would like to talk about is called The Lonely Planet Pocket Moscow and St. Petersburg. This particular travel guide is an up-to-date book on all things Moscow. It contains color travel maps, sample itineraries, and essential information on many sites and events. There are reviews for budgets of all sizes and include cultural insights as well. Second guidebook I would like to talk about is Fodor's Moscow and St. Petersburg. This travel guide includes top day trips. Local experts have checked every recommendation to make your more time efficient. Information on the restaurant, hotels, and must-see attractions make this a perfect for any trip to Russia. Third thing I would like to talk about is the Russian travel guide. This website is probably one of the most thorough guides to travel in all of Russia, not just Moscow and St. Petersburg. It gathers information on culture, weather, the geography, and attractions. There are planning guides as well, so you can create your perfect itinerary. Establishing residency. A temporary residency is required before establishing permanent residency. It takes about 6 months to obtain and is good for 3 years. Even though it is good for 3 years, it must be authenticated every year. You cannot move from your residency during your temporary permit period. You also have to obtain a work permit if you will be working outside the region of your residency. Finally, if you leave, you cannot leave for more than 3 months at any time. You also need required documents. In order to attain the temporary residency permit, you will need a valid passport, for 4 photographs, and the application. You also need proof of income and medical certification that you're not HIV positive. What I would now like to discuss is modes of travel. One way of travel is railways. Russia has the third largest railway infrastructure in the world. It is used for both passengers, traffic, and freight. Along with the traditional railways, Russia also has several rapid transit systems. Second is the waterways. Russian waterways are extensively used for both passenger, traffic, and freight transport. Both rivers and seas throughout the inland area are used to transport 22 million people and 80 billion tons of cargo. Third is roadways. The state of Russian roadways rank amongst the lowest in the world, while the number of cars in Russia increases every year. The amount of drivable road does not expand by much. This has been blamed on corruption, lack of oversight, and not improving standards that were set 30 years ago. Likewise, road safety is horrible, with Russia being fourth in road-related deaths. Fourth is air travel. There are over 2,700 airports in Russia, with the government subsidizing 140 domestic air routes between 12 airports. Aircraft manufacturing has been a huge industry in Russia through the collapse of the Soviet Union. It did not hurt, especially for civilian aircraft.